I never thought my own daughter would call me a thief. I was standing by the stove, waiting for the kettle to sing. Then the front door slammed. Hard. Enough to rattle the cheap picture frames on the hallway shelf. My son-in-law barged in, cheeks red and eyes sharp like a hawk circling weak prey. He held something small and wooden in his shaking hands. I knew that box. It was the family heirloom box, the one that held the emerald necklace, the piece that had been in our family for generations. The one I had kept in my care after my husband died, meant to pass on to my daughter one day when the time felt right. He brandished it like a weapon. "You thought you could just take this and run?" He spat, his voice high and breaking. I felt the blood drain from my face. My knees weakened. I tried to reach for the counter to steady myself. My daughter stormed in behind him, her hair wild, her eyes rimmed in red. She pointed at me with a shaking hand. "You're a liar," she screamed. "You were going to sell it behind our backs. You were going to rob your own family." I opened my mouth to speak, to explain, to beg her to remember who I was, but the words tangled in my throat like thorns. The kettle shrieked then, a high, desperate whistle that filled the room. None of us moved to turn it off. I looked at my daughter, my baby girl, the one I used to braid hair for before school, who used to crawl into my bed after nightmares, the daughter I carried in my arms when she had fevers. She stepped closer, her face contorted with a hatred I didn't know she was capable of. "Get out!" she screamed, spit flying. "You're no better than a common thief. You don't belong here anymore." The words echoed in my head, bouncing off every fragile place in me. The walls seemed to close in. I felt smaller than I had ever felt, smaller than the day I buried my husband, smaller than when I watched her walk down the aisle and thought, at least I still have her. I wanted to fall to my knees, to scream, to ask why. But something cold and sharp spread through my chest, steadied my shaking hands. I moved slowly, as if underwater, picking up my small overnight bag from the hallway. I had only brought a change of clothes and some lemon candies. I didn't pack my pride. When I turned back one last time, she was still glaring at me, breathing heavy. My son-in-law stood behind her, smirking. I saw it then, the satisfaction in his eyes. Like he had finally won a game I didn't know we were playing. The kettle was still screaming when I closed the door behind me. Outside, the sun was still shining. The world didn't stop. Birds still chirped, a dog barked across the street. But in me, everything had gone dark. I stood on the porch, my small suitcase by my feet, staring at the garden gnome I gave her years ago. Its painted smile looked cruel now. I felt my heart break into pieces so small I knew I might never gather them all again. In that moment, I realized something terrible and clear. They didn't love me. They loved what I could give them. And today, I wasn't useful anymore. They threw me out like an unwanted package. I stood on that front porch, my small suitcase beside me, as the door slammed shut with a final, echoing thud. It felt like a coffin lid closing. My fingers trembled on the handle. I kept expecting her to come running out, tears in her eyes, arms open, screaming, "Mama, I'm sorry." But there was only silence on the other side of that door. I turned slowly and looked at the neighborhood I used to help her choose. I remembered walking up and down this street with her when she first got married. She wanted a safe place for her future children. I had lent her half the down payment, told her I'd do anything so she could feel secure. Now the same neat lawns and trimmed hedges watched me like cold spectators. A curtain twitched across the street. Someone was watching. I imagined them whispering, "That's her mother, the one who got thrown out. Must have done something terrible." I wanted to scream that I was innocent, that I had never taken anything from them, except their cruelty. But my voice got stuck in my throat, thick as wet cement. I felt the sting of sweat down my spine despite the morning breeze. I couldn't move at first. I stood there, rooted, replaying her words. "Old witch. Thief. Get out." When my legs finally worked again, I stepped off the porch and onto the walkway. Each step felt like walking on broken glass. My eyes darted back one last time, hoping, some desperate, pathetic part of me hoping, She'd burst out, call it all a mistake. Nothing. I reached the sidewalk and felt like I might collapse. A couple walked past, the man's hand protectively resting on the woman's lower back. They didn't look at me, but I felt their avoidance like a slap. I pulled my phone out of my purse, my fingers numb. There were no missed calls, no messages from her. Just the last photo she'd sent me a month ago, her new haircut. I had texted back, beautiful as always, darling. I didn't know where to go. I didn't want to call anyone. My pride, my damn pride, kept whispering, don't let them see you like this. Don't let them see you small. I thought of Marjorie, my oldest friend. Her voice in my mind, steady and warm. You always have a place here, honey. Always. I called her number. My voice cracked when she answered. I don't even remember what I said, only that she told me to come right over, no questions. I looked at my daughter's house one last time, every window now a pair of accusing eyes. I turned away. With every step toward the bus stop, my heart got heavier. My daughter had chosen him over me. My breath came in shallow gasps. My knees threatened to give. But underneath all the shock and shame, there was a new, quiet voice, one I hadn't heard in years. You are not done yet. You are not finished. You are not only a mother. You are you. As I waited for the bus, suitcase at my feet, I let that thought curl inside me like a small flame in the dark. After leaving her house, I stayed at Marjorie's place. She took me in without a second thought, just like she always promised she would. I slept in her guest room, the one with the faded floral quilt and the old rocking chair in the corner. The air smelled like lavender sachets and lemon polish. Safe, quiet, but no amount of safety could hush my mind. The first night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling fan, listening to it whir and click like an old heartbeat. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my daughter's face twisted in anger, heard her voice shrieking that word, thief. I kept turning over the moment in my head. The jewelry box, the necklace, the accusation. It didn't make sense. I never took anything. I would never. But the way they looked at me, so certain, so hungry to believe the worst, that's what hurt the most. I replayed it again and again, like some cruel play I didn't audition for. My mind kept stuttering over the same questions. How did he get that necklace? Why did they believe him so quickly? Marjorie finally sat across from me, her hand landing on mine. Her eyes searched my face, looking for the woman she knew. You didn't do it, she said. Not a question. A fact. I looked up at her, my vision blurring. I opened my mouth to speak, but nothing came. My throat was thick, with all the words I hadn't been allowed to say. I know you, Mary, she continued, her voice low but firm. That girl of yours, she's lost, but you're not. You hear me? I nodded, but the movement felt too heavy. Later that afternoon, I wandered into the guest room and opened my suitcase. The lemon candies spilled into the corner pocket. I picked one up and held it, feeling the smallness of it, the sweetness that used to mean comfort. That's when it hit me. The necklace had always been in my jewelry box. My private one, the one in my bedroom at my daughter's house. The room I had started locking after the neighbor's son broke in a few years back. I remembered my son-in-law coming in one afternoon to fix the radiator. I remembered the odd questions about whether I still kept old junk in that box. That's when it all clicked. He had sabotaged me after months of pressuring me to add him to the title deeds. The realization sent a cold shiver down my back. He planned this. It wasn't a heat-of-the-moment accusation. He set me up. I felt something sharp and electric rise in my chest. Not anger. Not yet. Something closer to resolve. I set the lemon candy down carefully on the bedside table. I knew then that I wasn't just going to cry this away. I was going to find out the truth. And when I did, they would see me. All of me. I barely slept that night. My mind ran in frantic loops. The jewelry box, his smirk, her screaming. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face, twisted with betrayal that wasn't mine to carry. The next morning, Marjorie found me at the kitchen table before dawn. My tea had gone cold, my hands wrapped tight around the mug, like it might anchor me to the world. She sat across from me and placed her warm, steady hand over mine. "We have to do something," she said, her voice low but certain. "You can't let them do this to you." My lip trembled. "What can I do?" "They've already decided. They told everyone." Then she paused, her dish towel balled in her hands. "Mary," she said carefully, "didn't you have that little camera in your bedroom after that neighbor boy broke in?" I looked up sharply. The camera. I had nearly forgotten. My mind tumbled backward. The technician, a kind young man with gentle eyes, who had insisted on installing it just in case, who'd handed me a folder of instructions I never fully understood. I felt my chest tighten. I had no idea how to access it now, not without help. Marjorie didn't even let me finish my sentence before she snatched her phone and started dialing. "You still have his number, right?" she asked, already rifling through my old purse until she found the card. The young man, Daniel, answered on the second ring. When Marjorie explained what we needed, he promised he'd come immediately. Less than an hour later, he stood at her kitchen table, setting up his laptop, his movements quick but gentle, like he was handling a wounded bird. I hovered behind him, clutching my hands so tightly my nails dug crescents into my palms. He pulled up the camera archive, clicking through dates and times. My breath caught when I saw that familiar figure appear on the screen. My son-in-law, sliding into my room with confident steps, opening my jewelry box, slipping the necklace into his pocket. I felt my knees buckle, and Marjorie was there, sliding a chair under me before I could hit the floor. Daniel turned, his eyes wide, horror written all over his young face. "Mrs. Turner," he said softly, "do you want me to save this to a file for you?" I nodded, my throat so tight I couldn't force words out. He worked quickly, transferring the footage to a small thumb drive and even printing still images, each one a frozen betrayal. When he finished, he handed me the drive as if it were something sacred. I looked at it in my palm, so small and light, but I knew it weighed more than anything else I had carried these past weeks. Marjorie rested her hand on my shoulder, firm and steady. "Now you have the truth," she whispered. I closed my fingers around the drive. For the first time since she screamed at me to leave, I felt a new pulse move through me. Not rage, not grief, but something colder and sharper. Resolve. After a few minutes, she reached across and closed my fingers around the drive. "You need to show this to Mr. Davidson," she said. Her voice was calm, but her hand trembled. I nodded slowly, my throat tight. "I will," I whispered. "Today." Marjorie's eyes softened. "Do you want me to come with you?" I looked at her, really looked at her, the deep lines around her eyes, the tired but unwavering kindness. And for the first time in days, I didn't feel alone. "Yes," I said. We drove to Mr. Davidson's office in silence. The city outside the window blurred by in gray and gold streaks. Every stoplight felt like it might pull me back into the past, into that kitchen where she called me a thief, but I didn't let it. When we arrived, Mr. Davidson stood to greet us. His office smelled the same as always, lemon polish, old books, and faint cologne. But today it felt different, like a place where something might finally begin instead of just end. I handed him the drive with both hands. He didn't ask questions. He just plugged it into his computer, his eyes scanning the screen in heavy, silent concentration. When the footage ended, he took off his glasses and set them down carefully on his desk. "This changes everything," he said, his voice low but steady. I pressed my hands to my knees to stop them from shaking. "Will they believe me now?" I asked, the question so small it almost vanished between us. He looked up, eyes sharp as glass. "They won't have a choice." Marjorie reached for my hand and squeezed it so hard, I felt her pulse against my skin. I let out a slow breath I didn't know I'd been holding. In that moment, the grief and the shame didn't disappear. They would always be part of me. But I felt something else take shape underneath it all. A spine. Mr. Davidson started printing documents, scribbling notes, making calls. The quiet hum of the printer, the shuffle of paper, the low murmur of his voice, all of it felt like an anthem to a new chapter. I looked at Marjorie, at the dust motes dancing in the sunbeam beside her. I thought of all the ways I had made myself small to be loved, all the ways I had emptied myself out to be enough. Today, I wasn't small. Today, I held the truth in my hands. When we got back to her house, she led me into the kitchen and put the kettle on without a word. I sat at her small oak table, my hand still gripping the drive. I couldn't let it go. It felt like my last anchor to the world I knew, the world where my daughter might still believe me, where I wasn't just a ghost haunting the edges of her life. Marjorie set the tea down in front of me, lemon and honey, the way I used to make it for my daughter when she had the flu. I stared at the steam rising in slow, delicate spirals. "You need to tell her," Marjorie said finally, her voice gentle but unwavering. I shook my head so hard my neck ached. "She won't believe me. Not right now. Not after the way she looked at me." I heard my own voice. Small, frail, ashamed. Marjorie squeezed my wrist. "This isn't just about her believing you. This is about you knowing the truth. And keeping yourself safe." I stared down at the table, tracing the faint knife marks on the wood, thinking of all the meals shared here. The quiet dinners when my husband was still alive. The times my daughter sat here too, swinging her feet under the chair, telling me about her first school dance. A sudden wave of grief crashed over me, so fierce I thought it might knock me to the floor. But underneath that grief, there was something else now. Something solid. Resolve. I took a slow sip of tea. It scalded my tongue, but I didn't flinch. I needed that sharpness, that reminder that I was still here, still alive. I reached for my phone. Evelyn's name glowed on the screen. My old friend from church, the one who always said my heart was too big for my own good, the one who sat beside me every Sunday when my daughter stopped coming. She answered on the first ring, her voice warm and surprised. "Mary? Everything okay?" I felt my throat tighten, but I swallowed it down. "Evelyn," I said, my voice low, trembling but firm. "I need to show you something. And I need you to tell me the truth, no matter how much it hurts." There was a pause. Then that old, steady voice, "I'll come right over." I hung up and slid the thumb drive across the table toward Marjorie. She looked at it, then at me, her eyes shining with pride and fear all at once. I wasn't a thief. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't an old woman to be shoved aside and erased. I was about to prove it. And for the first time in what felt like years, I felt the air fill my lungs all the way. I watched the clock tick painfully slow as I waited for Evelyn. Every minute felt like a small eternity, a little pocket of silence that pressed harder and harder on my ribs. When the doorbell finally rang, I nearly jumped out of my skin. Marjorie opened the door before I could stand, and there was Evelyn, in her sensible beige coat, hair pinned back neatly, eyes soft but sharp as always. She stepped inside and looked at me for a long moment. Not at my clothes, or my hands, or the tears that probably still stained my cheeks. Right at me. "Oh, Mary," she whispered, stepping forward and wrapping me in the kind of hug only a lifelong friend can give. Her arms were firm, certain. She smelled like powder and old roses. When she pulled back, she didn't ask me what happened. She just looked at the thumb drive on the table. "Show me," she said. We sat at Marjorie's little kitchen table, the same one where I'd just sat with my tea hours earlier. Marjorie plugged the drive into her laptop, and Evelyn leaned in, her glasses sliding down her nose. The footage started. I kept my eyes on Evelyn's face, not the screen. I didn't need to see it again. I had already memorized every cruel second. I watched as her expression shifted. First confusion, then shock. Her hand flew to her mouth, her fingers trembling. When my son-in-law slipped the necklace into his pocket, her eyes filled with tears. When the video ended, she closed the laptop with a sharp snap. She sat there in silence, her breath ragged. Then she looked up at me. "You didn't do it," she said. "You never would." Her voice broke on the last word. I pressed my hands flat on the table to stop them from shaking. "Do you really believe me?" I asked, even though I hated how small my voice sounded. Evelyn reached across the table and grabbed my hands, squeezing them so tight it almost hurt. "I know you," she said, her voice low and fierce. I've known you for 40 years. I've seen you give your last $20 to strangers at the food pantry. I've seen you mend torn hymn books when no one else would bother. You would never steal from anyone, let alone your own daughter. The dam inside me finally broke. My shoulders shook. I felt Marjorie's hand on my back, Evelyn's hand still gripping mine. For a moment, I just let it all come out. The grief, the betrayal, the shame that wasn't even mine to carry. When I finally caught my breath, Evelyn wiped her eyes and straightened her spine. Her eyes turned sharp again. "What do you plan to do with this?" she asked. I shook my head slowly. "I don't know yet. Part of me still hopes. Maybe she didn't know. Maybe he tricked her too." Evelyn gave me a long, hard look. Then she said, "I will stand with you, Mary. In court, at church, in front of every neighbor who dares whisper otherwise. I'll testify to your character, whatever you need." Her words hit something deep inside me. I felt something warm and painful spread through my chest. I wasn't alone. I looked down at our hands, hers strong and warm over mine, and felt a small ember start to glow inside me. They thought they had destroyed me. They thought I would disappear quietly. But they forgot something important. I had people who knew the real me, and I was stronger than they ever imagined. By the time she left, the sun was low in the sky, casting long orange stripes across Marjorie's kitchen floor. I watched her walk to her car, her silhouette framed by the soft glow. She turned at the end of the walkway and gave me a little wave. I held it in my chest like a prayer. When the door closed behind her, I stood there for a long time. My head felt heavy, my legs unsteady, but my heart was different now. Something new was taking root there. I turned to Marjorie. "I need to go back to Mr. Davidson tomorrow," I said. My voice was low, but it didn't tremble. "I want to file a report. Officially." Marjorie's eyes widened, but she nodded. "Good. You can't let them smear your name like this." That night, I sat up alone in the guest room. I took out an old notebook I used to keep for grocery lists and started writing everything down. Every comment he'd made about my jewelry, the questions he asked about my room, the way my daughter had started pulling away months before. Every small memory I had brushed aside because I didn't want to believe she would ever turn on me. I wrote until my hand cramped, until the words blurred on the page. But I didn't stop. I needed this record. For me, for my sanity, for the woman I used to be before all this. At some point, Marjorie knocked softly and peeked in. "You need to rest," she whispered. I looked up at her and forced a small smile. "I will, soon." When I finally put the pen down, I felt an unexpected calm spread through me. A cold, sharp clarity. I was going to the police, and I was going to do it quietly. No calls to my daughter, no warning to that man who called himself my son-in-law. Let them keep thinking I was broken, confused, a frail old woman who wouldn't fight back. The next morning, I dressed carefully. Not the soft cardigans and elastic waist pants they liked to see me in. I wore my pressed navy slacks. The crisp white blouse my husband used to say made me look ready to take on the world. At Mr. Davidson's office, we filed the formal report. He submitted the footage as evidence. We also documented every gift and every transaction, every detail of my estate they had been eyeing like vultures. He looked at me across the big oak desk, his glasses perched low on his nose. "You understand, this might get ugly," he said, his voice gentle but firm. I took a slow breath and met his eyes. "It already is," I said. When I left his office, I stepped into the afternoon sun and felt it warm my face. For the first time since that day in her kitchen, I felt a piece of myself return, a piece that had been buried under years of guilt and self-doubt. I didn't run to them for approval. I didn't beg for understanding. I acted. And in that quiet, deliberate act, I found the first real taste of freedom. A week passed after filing that report. I stayed at Marjorie's, each day trying to stitch together the torn edges of my life. In the mornings, I sat on her porch with a blanket across my lap, watching the mailman make his rounds, and the neighborhood children race their bikes. It all felt like watching life through thick glass, close enough to see, but too far to touch. On the seventh day, Marjorie came outside holding her phone, her face pale. She handed it to me without a word. A message from Evelyn. A screenshot of a Facebook post from my daughter. We regret to share that my mother is no longer well. She's been struggling with memory issues and recently took something very important from our home. We love her and are trying to get her help, but please respect our privacy during this difficult time. I read it 3 times. Each word hit harder than the last. Memory issues. Struggling. Trying to get her help. I felt my chest cave in like all the air had been sucked out of the world. My daughter's words weren't just betrayal. They were a public execution of my character. I scrolled further. Dozens of comments from cousins, old church acquaintances, neighbors. Oh no, praying for her recovery. She always seemed so strong. I'm so sorry. She's lucky to have you looking out for her. Lucky. Lucky to have the daughter who shoved me out and locked the door behind me. I pressed the phone to my chest and squeezed my eyes shut. My mind screamed, "They're destroying you! Right now, in real time, they are burying your truth under their lies." When I opened my eyes, Marjorie was kneeling in front of me, her hands wrapped around mine. "Mary," she whispered, her voice breaking, "you don't have to read that. You don't owe them anything." But I did read it. Every comment, every sympathy-laced dagger. I needed to see it all, to understand the battlefield they'd chosen. I stood up slowly, the blanket slipping from my shoulders onto the porch floor. "I need to prepare," I said. My voice was low, but it didn't waver. Marjorie stared up at me, her eyes wide and glistening. "Prepare for what?" I looked out at the street, at the children, the cars, the blooming rose bushes, all the things I had once wanted to protect for my daughter. "For war," I said. That evening, I started sorting through my old files again. Medical records, financial documents, the timeline I had been building in my journal. I scanned every page, labeled every envelope. I copied the security footage 10 times. I backed it up in cloud drives, sent it to Evelyn, to Mr. Davidson, even to an old lawyer friend of my husband who still owed me a favor. I no longer cared if they thought I was a sweet old mother. I was no longer waiting to be saved or understood. I was building my defense. And in the silence of Marjorie's living room, with only the soft hum of her old fridge for company, I felt the first flicker of power hum beneath my skin. I thought betrayal would end in a single sharp moment. A clean break, like glass shattering on the kitchen floor. But it doesn't. It seeps into you slow, like cold water through a cracked ceiling, until you're soaked and don't even remember what warmth felt like. After their post, the calls stopped. My sister, who once called me every Sunday like a ritual, stopped picking up. My niece sent a single text, "I hope you get the help you need." I sat by Marjorie's window at night, watching the moon carve pale lines across her garden. I could hear the neighbors' wind chimes when the breeze picked up, that sad, tinny music echoing in the dark. I'd always believed that being a mother meant giving without condition, that love would be returned, eventually, even if it came back in odd shapes, or took longer than I wanted. But now, with each night, I saw it more clearly. They didn't want a mother. They wanted a resource, a living wallet, a silent, aging body to stand behind them and nod. I thought of my daughter as a little girl, clinging to my legs at the school gates, crying if I left too quickly. I used to see her need as love. Now I see it for what it was, dependency mistaken for devotion. Some nights, I wanted to write her a letter, to tell her I was still here, that I would always love her, no matter how deep she cut. But I never did. Each time I put pen to paper, my hand froze. Because love without respect isn't love. It's a leash. And I was done wearing it. I spent those nights journaling every detail. The day he first asked about my jewelry, the odd glance she gave me when I mentioned updating my will, the new coldness in her hugs that I pretended not to feel. Mr. Davidson had asked me to write everything, to build my record carefully. I did it with a kind of reverence. Each sentence was a small funeral for a piece of me that died in her kitchen that day. Marjorie would check on me sometimes, pushing open the door with a soft knock. She'd bring me warm milk or a slice of her banana bread, sit across from me without saying a word. In those silences, I felt the shape of true love, the kind that stays when you have nothing left to give. I read their social media posts every morning. I watched them shape a story of a confused, fragile mother. People believed them, of course. It's easier to believe the narrative that protects your comfort. But I knew the truth, and now I had more than my word. I had evidence. By the time the moon dipped low each night, I found a strange peace in the quiet. Not a forgiving peace. Not yet. But the steady, cold kind that comes when you realize you have nothing left to lose. In the morning light, I looked at my reflection in Marjorie's hallway mirror. My face was thinner than I remembered. The lines around my mouth deeper, like tiny scars from words never spoken. I pressed a palm to the glass, steadying myself. "You're still here," I whispered. "You're still standing." After breakfast, Marjorie drove me to Mr. Davidson's office again. We carried 3 folders, one with my timeline and journal, one with printed screenshots of every post and comment, and one with copies of the security footage. He was waiting for us, glasses low on his nose, a legal pad already open on his desk. When he saw me, he stood, not out of habit, out of respect. That simple gesture nearly undid me. We sat down, and I started laying everything out. My hands didn't shake this time. My voice didn't quiver. He listened, sometimes scribbling a note, sometimes watching my face carefully. When I finished, he tapped the end of his pen against the pad and took a slow breath. "This is solid," he said. "It's not just your word against theirs anymore. This is evidence of theft, and we can show a clear motive. Control over your estate, your assets, your reputation." I swallowed hard, staring at the tidy pile of papers between us. All my heartbreak, all my humiliation, compressed into neat, numbered pages. Mr. Davidson leaned forward. "I recommend we prepare both a criminal complaint and a civil defamation suit. It's a 2-pronged approach. We hold him accountable for the theft, and we restore your good name in the eyes of the law." The words felt heavy and final. A part of me still wanted to run, to crawl back to the days when I believed a pot of soup and a patient conversation could fix anything. But that part was shrinking now, starved by their lies. I nodded. "Do it." My voice was quiet, but inside it roared. He smiled. Not a warm, comforting smile, a soldier's smile. "We'll start today. I'll issue subpoenas to the jewelry appraiser, get statements from Evelyn and Marjorie. We'll preserve all social media records before they can delete anything." Marjorie squeezed my shoulder from behind. I felt her nails dig slightly into my skin, reminding me I wasn't alone in this trench. On the way home, I stared out the car window. The city looked different, sharper, less forgiving. But for the first time in months, maybe years, I felt like I was moving forward on my own terms. That night, I sat at Marjorie's kitchen table under the humming yellow light and pulled out my old journal again. But this time, I didn't write about them. I started writing about me. Memories of my husband's jokes, my daughter's first words, the smell of fresh bread on Sunday mornings, the things they couldn't steal, no matter how hard they tried. I cried while I wrote, but they were different tears, not the silent, defeated kind. These tears felt like cleansing rain after a long, choking drought. Tomorrow would bring lawyers and threats and courtroom whispers, but tonight, I belonged to myself again, and that, I realized, was the beginning of my real freedom. In the morning, I dressed with careful precision. My navy slacks again, the crisp white blouse, a strand of simple pearls, not the heirloom one, but another my husband had given me on our 25th anniversary. The one he said made me look unapologetically strong. When I stepped into the kitchen, Marjorie stopped slicing apples and just stared. Her eyes filled, but she didn't say anything. She only handed me a small linen handkerchief, pressed into my palm with a firm nod. Mr. Davidson met us at his office. His team had already prepared the documents, the criminal complaint for theft and fraud, and the civil suit for defamation. 2 thick envelopes, heavy with every betrayal, every humiliating comment they'd written about me online. He slid the papers across the table. "Once you sign these, there's no going back," he said softly. I picked up the pen. My fingers hesitated just for a heartbeat. I thought of her tiny hand in mine on her first day of kindergarten, her breathless giggles on Christmas morning, the gentle weight of her sleeping on my chest as a baby. Then I saw her face again that day in the kitchen, twisted, screaming, calling me a thief. I signed. Once, twice, over and over until my signature felt like a weapon in my hand. Mr. Davidson gathered the documents, tapping them into a neat stack. "They'll be served today at her house. I want you to stay here until I call. We don't want you anywhere near them right now." I nodded, my heart hammering so loud I could almost hear it echo in the walls. Hours passed like wet cement. Marjorie made tea, but I didn't drink it. I just held the cup, feeling the steam warm my fingers. Finally, Mr. Davidson called. His voice was calm, almost too calm. "It's done." They were served. I didn't ask how they reacted. I didn't need to. I could already picture it. The shock in her eyes, the collapse of his practiced lies. When I hung up, I pressed my forehead to the cool kitchen window. Outside, the sun was setting, splashing pink and gold across the sky. It looked almost too beautiful for a day like this. Marjorie stood behind me, silent. I could feel her waiting for me to say something, to fall apart, to scream. But I didn't. I felt hollow and alive at the same time, like a cave echoing with its first sound in years. I turned around slowly. "It's done," I said. She nodded once, her eyes shining with both sorrow and pride. In that moment, I realized something. I wasn't just fighting for my name. I was fighting for the part of me they thought they had snuffed out forever. The quiet woman who always forgave, who always gave, who shrank to fit the shape of other people's needs. She was gone. And the woman who remained? She would never beg to be let in again. 2 weeks later, I stepped into the courthouse. The air inside was cold, almost sterile. The walls lined with cheap beige paint that somehow felt smaller than the pain echoing in my chest. My heels clicked on the floor, each step a steady drumbeat. Marjorie walked beside me, her arm brushing mine. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. We sat in the front row, right behind Mr. Davidson's table. I clasped my hands in my lap so tightly, my knuckles turned white. I could feel my heart fluttering like a trapped bird, but underneath that panic, there was a steady thrum of something else. Readiness. When they walked in, I didn't look away. My daughter looked thinner than I remembered. Her eyes hollow, dark smudges under them like bruises she didn't know she wore. My son-in-law scanned the room with quick, darting eyes, the eyes of a man searching for a back door. I watched him realize there wasn't one. The judge called the session to order. Mr. Davidson stood, calm and unhurried, and began laying out my story, the theft, the footage, the smear campaign. Then he played the video. The room fell into a heavy, suffocating silence. The sound of the jewelry box opening echoed, sharp as a gunshot. I didn't watch the screen. I watched her. Her face crumpled in slow motion. I saw her lips part, her hand rising to her mouth, the tears springing up so fast she didn't have time to wipe them away. Beside her, my son-in-law went pale. He shifted in his seat, eyes flicking to the exits, to the judge, to the floor. His jaw twitched. When the footage ended, the judge looked over his glasses at them. "Do you have any defense to present?" My son-in-law stood up too quickly, his voice a shaky mess. It wasn't supposed to go this far," he stammered. His words tumbled over each other, a sad pile of rehearsed excuses and fractured lies. Then it came. The confession. Under oath, in front of everyone, he admitted it. That he had staged the theft, manipulated my daughter, twisted her grief and fears to make me look senile and unfit. That he wanted control. Over the house, my assets, her loyalty. My daughter crumpled into sobs beside him, her whole body folding in on itself like paper in rain. I sat frozen. No triumph, no relief, just a cold emptiness spreading in my bones. The judge banged his gavel and called for order, his voice echoing off the walls. The lawyers shuffled papers. The bailiff moved closer to the table, but all I could hear was her wailing. "I didn't know! I didn't know!" Marjorie slipped her hand into mine and squeezed. I hadn't even realized I was trembling. In that courtroom, under the harsh fluorescent lights and the smell of stale coffee, the truth finally stood naked. I felt no victory in that moment, only grief. Grief for the daughter I lost long before today. Grief for all the silent sacrifices I made that were twisted into weapons against me. But I also felt something else. The first breath of real freedom. The weight starting to lift, molecule by molecule. When they let him out of the courtroom, he didn't look at me, and I didn't look away. I stood there in the hall, the courtroom doors heavy and final behind me. Marjorie stayed at my side, her hand firm on my elbow. Then I heard it. The soft patter of feet, the sharp inhale. My daughter. She stumbled toward me, tears streaming down her face, her arms outstretched like a child afraid of the dark. "Mama, please," she sobbed, her voice splitting in the middle. "I didn't know. I swear I didn't know." She dropped to her knees on the cold tile floor, gripping my hands with shaking fingers. I felt her tears soak my skin, hot and desperate. For a moment, I wanted to reach for her hair like I used to when she scraped her knee, to pull her to my chest and promise her it would all be okay. But I didn't move. She pressed her forehead against my hands, her shoulders jerking with each broken cry. People passed by, some slowing to stare, others pretending not to see. She looked up at me, her face red and raw. "I thought you were losing your mind," she choked out. "He told me you needed help, that you were confused, that—" Her voice dissolved into a thin wail. I watched her. The daughter I once braided hair for every morning before school. The girl who held my hand so tight at the dentist's office. The woman who called me old witch with her eyes on fire. I saw it all in her face now. The betrayal, the guilt, the sudden aching clarity. She tried to pull me closer, but I stepped back. Her fingers slipped from mine. "You didn't ask," I whispered, my voice so quiet I wasn't sure it was mine. "You didn't look at me and see me. You just believed what was easier." She shook her head violently, her hair whipping around her shoulders. "Please, please forgive me. We can fix this." I took another step back. The hallway felt endless behind me, like a path I had never dared to walk until now. "Love without respect isn't love," I said. My voice didn't shake. It didn't rise. It just was. Her face crumpled again, and she collapsed onto her side, sobbing so loudly the echo clattered off the walls. I turned to Marjorie, whose eyes were wet but fierce. She gave a tiny nod, as if to say, "Go on. You can do it." I didn't look back. Not once. As I walked away, my daughter's cries grew fainter, swallowed by the sounds of the courthouse. Distant doors, low voices, the scrape of a bailiff's chair. With each step, I felt a piece of that old life peel away. The life where I begged to be seen. The life where I traded my dignity for scraps of conditional love. Now all that was left was me. And for the first time in my life, that felt like enough. In the days that followed, everything unraveled for them faster than I imagined. My son-in-law was arrested within a week. Fraud, defamation, theft. Words that used to feel like faraway courtroom jargon were now stamped in black ink on his life. I watched it all from Marjorie's living room. We sat side by side on her old floral sofa, the local news buzzing faintly from her small TV. The reporter's voice was steady, matter-of-fact, but every word felt like a small, quiet thunderclap. David Carter, local contractor, is facing multiple charges related to financial misconduct and elder mistreatment. Marjorie kept glancing at me, searching for any sign of satisfaction on my face, but I didn't feel triumphant. I felt still, like a lake after a storm. My daughter? She vanished into her own private exile. The family she'd weaponized against me now turned against her. Shame and pity mixing into something heavy and suffocating. Cousins who once left cheerful comments on her photos now posted vague Bible verses about betrayal and sin. Neighbors started closing doors faster when she walked by. She called a few times. I never answered. I listened to her voicemails. Each one a messy knot of apologies, sobs, bargaining. I saved them, not out of cruelty, but as proof to myself that I wasn't imagining the shift. At church, people approached me cautiously. Soft apologies, hesitant hugs, stuttering offers to bring casseroles. I declined them all. I didn't need comfort food or whispered pity. I had already survived the worst betrayal a mother can feel, to be discarded, rewritten into a villain, and left to rot alone. Now, I was no one's silent matriarch, no one's unguarded ATM. Marjorie and Evelyn stood by me through every quiet, tense gathering, every Sunday service, every awkward grocery store encounter. Their loyalty shone brighter now, stripped of pleasantries and small talk. I started noticing small things again. The warmth of my tea mug in the morning, the weight of my knitting needles in my hands, the way the sparrows gathered on Marjorie's fence. Life's smallest details felt like gifts I had ignored too long. In the quiet of the evenings, I sat on Marjorie's porch with my journal in my lap. I wrote not about them, but about me. My joys, my losses, my hard-won lessons. I realized then, all those years I thought I was building a future for my family. I was really giving them a map to my vulnerabilities. Now, finally, I was charting my own map. My daughter and her husband had built their kingdom on my love and my money. When that foundation crumbled, they were left standing in their own dust. I felt sorry for her. In a way only a mother can. But pity and forgiveness are not the same. She chose her side, and I chose mine. Mine,